Welcome back to Vintage HLC Show and Tell. Today we're going to look at treatment numbers from the late 1890s to about 1906 or 1907. So this is going to involve dinnerware shapes like Golden Gate, American Beauty, Colonial, Seneca, King Charles, and the Angelus. We're going to look at how these numbers relate to one another because there is a little bit of rhyme and reason to this numbering system of this time period. So we'll start with American Beauty. And we have the Campion print. This is an underglazed print in red with gold trim. The lid tells us that the treatment number is 714. So if we look at the treatment list, I've got a partial one printed out here. It says 714, Campion print, red, gold knobs, and handles. We also have a medium-sized jug in the back, American Beauty with some gold, Campion print in red, again 714. And we see there are other colors as well, blue, green, gray, red, purple. Some have gold, some do not. Each one has its own treatment number. Now what happens if this treatment appears on another shape? And we have Colonial in green and blue, we have Seneca in green, and we have King Charles in blue. Well, it turns out all you have to do is take the American Beauty treatment number and add a leading digit. In the case of Colonial, you add a 4, Seneca you add a 6, King Charles you add an 8, and Angelus you add a 9. So here are American Beauty Campion prints again. Here they are in Colonial. Again, we see our 700 numbers. We have a 4 in front. Seneca, all our Campion prints, 700 numbers with a 6 in front. I don't have one for King Charles. And then we have the Angelus, our 700 numbers with a 9 in front. So whether we have these or not, these listings, all we really need is the American Beauty one. Because we already know what 714 is, we can figure out the others. So this Colonial Pickle has the green version of Campion with no gold. Well, in American Beauty, that would be 702. So the Colonial number should be 4702. And if we look at that, it is in fact 4702, Campion plain print, green, no gold. Same for the blue version with no gold. This is a Colonial Creamer. On American Beauty, that would be 701. So the Colonial number should be 4701. And it is. Blue, no gold, 4701. For our King Charles piece, the covered dish, blue with gold, that would be, let's see, blue with gold is 711, so that one would be 8711. And finally, Seneca, green with gold. Let's look at the Seneca listing. We've got green with full gold, 6722. So American Beauty acts as a basis of sorts when it comes to underglazed prints in particular, that when other shapes pick them up, all you need to do is change that leading digit. Now we'll look at Seneca in particular, because these three sheets come from, I think it's 1905, where we have all these Seneca treatments. Now this first sheet has treatments that were developed specifically for the Seneca shape. These next two pages, and there's far more treatments, are all for Seneca, but they all have a leading 6, and all these treatments come from American Beauty. So let's look at these for a moment. Because we can reduce this even further. There are 31 listings here, but there are essentially only 5 treatments. We've got Hopvine, Daisy, Holly, Pansy, and Violet. So there's only 5. They come in various colors. There's various uses of gold, but we can reduce it to just 5. So we'll look at one of these. This is Seneca with the Holly treatment, filled in details of green and red, and then we've got gold stippling. We come over to the listing and we see Holly filled red and green, stippled knobs and handles. This was pattern number 6009S. Now, what happens when you have a backwards pickup? That is, something is developed for Seneca, but then is used on a previous shape, like Colonial. And we have one right here. It's the exact same pattern. Holly with filled in details. We even have the gold stippling on the handle. This treatment number is the same as the Seneca treatment number. There's no changing of a digit, there's no reassigning it a new number, it just uses the same one. So in this case, it's going to be 6009S. For American Beauty, we have a cake plate, same treatment. Now we have gold line. That one is 6009. So it's just full gold. You can also find this on Golden Gate, and there will be similar numbers. So if you're going backwards and picking up a predecessor with a treatment, then the number's preserved. There's no changes, which is really nice. It'd been nice if they'd done that for all the shapes throughout every decade, but that only works with this fancy embossed group. We'll look at another piece of Seneca, this time a covered sugar bowl. Look at the marking while we're here. White granite. This is violets with filled-in details. We have gold stipple on the handles and the finial. We also have it on the edge. We look at our listing, and we find it here, violet. It has gold stippled edges and handles. It is 6015. This is a treatment that originated on Seneca. Now, what happens when it goes backwards and is picked up and used on Colonial? It's the same treatment, violet, filled-in details, gold stipple on the handles, the finial, and the edge. The lid tells us that it is treatment 6015. This is not a listing from the Colonial shape, this is a listing from Seneca. We go back again, 6015. Violet filled-in details with gold stipple. Now, our next example has gold stamps. This is rather unusual because we have a Hudson Baker and we have American Beauty casserole. And it's unusual in that as Hudson was being introduced, American Beauty was being discontinued. So the fact that these two have anything in common is rather strange. This is pattern H42. It was also renumbered as 420 later on. It's gold stamped with a center medallion that was developed for Hudson. So we're talking about 1906, 1907. It then goes backwards and gets picked up with a predecessor in the form of American Beauty, and we look at the lid and we have H42, the Hudson treatment number. So this backwards effect of where it's picking up treatments and preserving the number only works for the fancy embossed group. There is an exception. We will see it later on when we look at Empress and Quaker, but it's mainly limited to this time period of the early 1900s. Now, one last thing I want to talk about. This numbering system, which goes from Golden Gate to the Angelus, we'll look at this catalog from 1902, and it starts with Golden Gate. And we have pattern number 1, pattern number 2, and then it goes on, American Beauty, Colonial, and so forth. We get to the Angelus in 1906, and we see pattern number 9999. They don't go to 10,000. Instead, what they do is they start using the prefix system AX1. Then Hudson uses an H, Niagara uses an N, Genesee uses a G, and so forth. This prefix system lasts all the way into the 1980s. But if you look at this, you might go, okay, we're starting with number 1 over here, we're ending with 9,999 over here. There must be roughly 10,000 treatments on these 6 shapes in this short time period. Well, the fact of the matter is there's far less than 10,000. There's even less than 1,000, really. Because if we start looking at, let's say Seneca, we're only dealing with 5 treatments. We have 31 listings, but essentially there's only 5. If we look at all these which come from American Beauty, it looks like there's dozens of them listed here, but there's really not. We have rose plain print. That could be counted as number 1. This rose and ribbon, that's a second one. Phlox is a third. Campion's a fourth. Osborne and Creole. So you've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 treatments on this one page. So we're nowhere near 1,000 even. When you start taking all these American Beauty repeats and when you start reducing all these underglaze treatments down to one treatment instead of multiple ones with different colors and different uses of gold, we're actually less than 500. Another thing to realize about this numbering system that goes from 1 to 10,000 is that the toiletware Mingo, Wyoming Bridal, and Duchess, which we already saw, they used the 2000s. They also used the 7000s. The 3000s and the 5000s aren't used that much. They're mainly picked up. For example, when they needed extra numbers in American Beauty, they used 3000s. When they needed extra numbers in Colonial, they used 5000s. So it's rather sporadic. So even though this may look intimidating, and you go through and there's page after page after page of all these treatments, there's really not that many when you get down to it. So that's the takeaway from this. Don't get intimidated with all these listings and all these numbers. In actuality, there's not that many. So I just wanted to go over this because, excuse me, I'm going to start looking at some of these shapes in more detail, like Colonial and Seneca are coming up next. And I'm going to be referring to this treatment number system that is unique to the Fancy Embossed group. So I think that's going to be it for now, and next time we'll look at Colonial.